The chalk hits the board so hard it snaps. 43 students stop breathing at the same time. At the front of the room, a professor with 20 years of tenure is smiling. The kind of smile that means someone in this room is about to be taken apart in public. And everyone already knows who. 5 minutes, he says. Impress me, or drop my class today. The kid in the back row stands up. 19 years old, scholarship, night shifts. 9 weeks of silence in the last seat by the door. He walks to the board, and the moment he sees the equation he stops, because he's seen it before. Not in a textbook, not in a journal, in his dead father's handwriting. 984 seconds from now, a man who spent 2 decades building an empire is going to hear a name he buried a very long time ago. And nothing in this room survives it. The kid picks up the chalk and starts to write. He was 6 years old, and nobody told him what death meant. Not in words he could use. Not in any way that made sense to a silly standing in a room full of white flowers and dark clothing, and the low, continuous sound of adults doing something with their voices that he didn't have a name for yet. He just stood there, very still, the way children stand still when they understand that stillness is what's required of them, even when they don't understand why. The wooden box was at the front of the room, closed. Someone had told him not to touch it. He couldn't remember who. There had been a lot of people telling him things that morning in the specific, gentle, urgent way of people who need a child to behave and don't have time to explain the reasons. He didn't touch it. He stood near the back wall instead, next to a potted plant that needed water, and he watched. Watched the people in dark clothes move through the room with plates of food nobody was eating. Watched 2 older women hold each other by the arms and rock slightly, the way boats rock when the water moves underneath them. Watched a man he didn't recognize press both hands against his own face and stay like that for a long time. And he watched his mother. She was standing 3 feet away, which was close enough to touch, but she might as well have been somewhere else entirely. Her eyes were fixed on a point in the middle distance that didn't correspond to anything in the room. Her face had a quality he'd never seen on it before. Not sadness exactly. Something harder than sadness. Something that had been pressed down and compressed until it stopped looking like a feeling and started looking like a feature. She didn't look at him. Not once. Not for the entire time they were in that room, which was the part that stayed. Not the white flowers. Not the wooden box. Not the strangers pressing warm, damp hands against his cheeks and saying things like he was a good man and you look just like him. And, so sorry, sweetheart. So sorry. The part that stayed was his mother's face, turned away, already learning how to be somewhere that wasn't here, and his grandmother's hand around his, tight, the bone-deep tight of someone who needs to hold on to something solid and has chosen him. He held back, as tight as he could, 'cause even at 6, even without the vocabulary for it, he understood. Somebody in this room needed to be held on to, and he was going to do that, whatever that required. 2024 of October, early. 3:17 in the morning. The print shop smell was still on his jacket. 4 hours of loading caliper vibrations. Pulling jammed sheets from the secondary feed mechanism, which jammed on average twice per shift with the reliability of something that had given up pretending otherwise. The overnight supervisor, a man named Darnell, who communicated primarily through sighs of varying intensity, had given him the specific sigh that meant good work. Don't expect me to say so out loud. Elijah Cole walked home. 23 minutes. Same route every time. Past the laundromat that was always inexplicably open regardless of hour. Past the convenience store with the hand-lettered sign in the window that had been advertising the same sale on energy drinks since September. Past the parking structure on Clement Street, where someone had once, memorably, left a shopping cart full of houseplants on the 3rd level. For reasons Elijah had never been able to determine. He noticed things. Couldn't help it. Details accumulated the way they do when your brain doesn't have an auto switch. When you've spent enough years in enough rooms where noticing things was the difference between being fine and not being fine. He climbed the stairs to his apartment. 2nd floor. The 3rd step from the top made a sound like a question being asked. It always did. Unlocked his door. Small room. One window facing the parking lot. A lamp with a slightly bent neck that threw light at an angle, approximately 15 degrees off from useful. A desk that had come with the apartment and bore the evidence of every previous tenant in a series of rings and scratches. And one mysterious gouge near the left corner that Elijah had decided not to investigate too closely. On the desk, arranged with a precision that was not accidental, 3 mechanical pencils, parallel to equal spacing, a cup of cold coffee from 6 hours ago that he would drink anyway, 2 textbooks stacked at the upper left corner, and 1 item that didn't belong with the rest, a notebook, old. The leather cover had gone soft at the corners from years of being opened and closed and opened again, from being carried in bags and set on tables and held in hands that needed something to hold. The pages had gone the color of weak tea. The binding had been re-glued once, not well. Small yellowish bubbles along the spine where the adhesive had dried imperfectly, evidence of someone trying to preserve something that mattered. On the first page, in handwriting, that Elijah had spent 6 years learning to recognize the way other people learn to recognize faces. Marcus Cole, Crestwood University, September 2001. He sat down, turned to page 34. Not because he needed to. He had page 34 memorized. He had pages 1 through 112 memorized. He'd read them so many times the words had stopped being words and started being something closer to a frequency. A sound at a register he could feel but not quite hear. His father's voice, which he'd never actually heard. Not in any way that counted. Not in any way that held. He'd been 6 years old when Marcus Cole died, and 6-year-olds don't retain voices the way they retain other things. Smell, pressure, the specific warmth of a hand, the tone of something said in a dark room when you couldn't sleep. He had fragments, impressions. He did not have a voice, so he had these pages instead. And most nights that was enough to keep going. Here is what Elijah Cole was in the fall of 2024. 19 years old. Sophomore at Crestwood University, full academic scholarship, the kind that covered tuition and housing, and a monthly stipend that covered approximately 70% of what he actually needed to live on. The remaining 30% came from 4 nights a week at the print shop on Delmore Avenue, where the pay was adequate and the hours were terrible, and the work was the kind that left your hands tired enough that the rest of you could finally stop. I carried a 3.4 GPA. Solid, consistent, precisely calibrated. Not because a 3.4 was the best he could do, because a 3.4 was the best he could do while remaining invisible. And remaining invisible was the plan. Had been the plan since he was 8 years old. And his grandmother sat with him on her porch, on a hot summer afternoon, and explained something that most people decades to understand. Don't let them see everything you've got, she said. Her voice was slow, measured. The voice of a woman who tested each word for weight before releasing it. People can't take what they don't know you have. He'd understood enough of it then. He understood all of it now. On the 3 schools he'd attended before Crestwood. Public, underfunded, doing their adequate best. Being visibly intelligent had specific costs, not abstract costs. Actual ones. The kind that showed up as a certain quality of attention from teachers. Surprised attention. The kind with eyebrows in it. The kind that said, I didn't expect this from you in ways so ingrained the teachers themselves probably didn't notice they were saying it. The kind that made you want to disappear back into the average. So he had. He'd learned to perform exactly enough. Enough to stay. Enough to not fail. Enough that no one looked too closely. And underneath the performance, in the notebook, in the hours between midnight and 4 a.m., in the work that had no audience and required none, that's where the real thing happened. The thing he'd been building for 6 years, since he was 13. Since the summer he climbed into his grandmother's attic, looking for a box fan, and came down having found something that would reorganize the rest of his life. The attic had been brutal. August heat without mercy. The kind that makes the air feel solid. He'd gone up because the window unit in the living room had stopped working, and his grandmother had mentioned, approximately 4 times, that there was a box fan somewhere in the attic from some previous summer, and Elijah had finally volunteered to locate it. He found the fan in 7 minutes. And then, because he was 13 and couldn't leave things alone, he looked at what else was up there. Boxes, mostly. Old furniture under sheets. A broken rocking chair that looked like it had a story. Rolled up rugs. The accumulated evidence of a life that had outlasted some of its objects. And against the far wall, half hidden behind a tower of storage boxes, covered by a blue plastic tarp, a cardboard box. His grandmother's handwriting on the side, in black marker, Marcus's things. He stood in that attic in the August heat for a long time, then he pulled the box out from behind the others, sat down on the dusty floor, opened it. 7 notebooks, same leather covers, same soft corners, same smell. old paper, and something else. Something that might have been the cedar of the attic, or might have been something that had belonged to the notebooks themselves. On the first one, Marcus Cole. Crestwood University, September 2001. He didn't know what Crestwood University was. He didn't know what the equations on the first page meant. He couldn't read the margin notes. They went sideways and upside down and off into corners like his father had been running out of room, and simply refused to accommodate that by stopping. He sat in the attic until the heat became genuinely dangerous. Then he took the notebooks downstairs. His grandmother found him 2 hours later at the kitchen table. 7 notebooks spread around him. Page after page of notation he couldn't yet decipher. Margin notes in handwriting that felt, even then, even before he knew what he was looking at, strangely familiar. Like seeing your own handwriting before you know you have a particular handwriting. She stood in the kitchen doorway. She looked at him, then at the notebooks, then at him again. She didn't say put those away. She didn't say where did you find those. She didn't say anything at all. She went to the refrigerator, made him a glass of iced tea with 2 ice cubes, the way she always made it, set it on the table next to his elbow without a word, and went back to whatever she'd been doing, which was her way of saying yes, her loudest possible yes. The affirmations not cost her something and that she gave anyway because she understood, in whatever way grandmothers understand things without being told, that this was necessary. He drank the iced tea and kept reading. He taught himself. That sentence needs to stand alone for a moment, because the tendency is to gloss over it, to move past it toward the more dramatic parts of the story, to treat it as context rather than as the central fact. So, he taught himself. No tutor, special program, no mentor who saw his potential and opened the right doors, no prepper horse, no connection to anyone who had navigated this particular terrain before. Just a boy. 7 notebooks and evenings and weekends and summers. He started with the basics, working backward from what his father referenced, teaching himself the scaffolding that his father had already moved past. He used the school library during the day and his grandmother's Wi-Fi at night. He made notes in the margins of composition notebooks he bought 3 for $1 at the dollar store. He crossed things out, started over. I made the same mistake multiple times before the correction became permanent. By 15, he wasn't just reading his father's work. He was following it, understanding it, seeing where an equation was going before it got there, the way you can hear where a sentence is going before it ends. By 17, he was solving problems his father had left unfinished. Not all of them. The hardest ones remained hard, but enough. And every time one resolved, every time the pieces arranged themselves into the particular click of something correct, he felt something he still didn't have a precise word for. Not pride. Pride was too clean, too simple. Something that had grief mixed into it. Something that felt like having a conversation with someone who was already gone. By 19, sitting in the back corner of advanced number theory at Crestwood University, he was the most capable person in that room. He'd never verified that against anyone else. He'd never needed to. He just knew the way you know things that have been tested in private for long enough. The plan was to keep knowing it privately, until he had a reason not to. He hadn't intended to come to Crestwood. That requires explaining because it's not an obvious choice. A full scholarship to a school where you have no connections, where the tuition without aid would require a financial relationship with debt that would take 2 decades to recover from, where the mathematics department was, by reputation, both excellent and brutal. But then the acceptance letter had arrived with something attached. A note from the admissions office. Routine, probably. Generated by an algorithm that cross-referenced applicant names against alumni records. We noticed that a Marcus Cole attended Crestwood University from 2001 to 2003, graduating from the graduate mathematics program. If this individual is a family member and you'd like information about the Alumni Association, please contact. He'd read that note 4 times. Graduate mathematics program, 2001 to 2003. His father had been here. And nobody, not his mother, not his grandmother, not the universe in any of its various communications with him, had ever mentioned it. I had accepted the scholarship the next day. Advanced number theory met Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 p.m. Room 118, first floor of Whitfield Hall. South-facing windows that brought in good light in the afternoon. 43 seats, usually about 40 filled. A blackboard that ran the full length of the front wall. which was either an amenity or a threat depending on context. Elijah had been attending for 9 weeks. Same seat every time. Back row. Far left corner. The seat closest to the exit, which he chose for practical reasons, and had been unable to change after the first week because the choice had already calcified into habit. He arrived at 1:58 p.m., 2 minutes early, same as always. Long enough to be settled before other people arrived. Not so early that he'd have to make conversation. He set up his materials. 1 notebook open to a fresh page. 3 mechanical pencils parallel. Not a system he'd consciously designed, it had just accumulated, the way habits do when you repeat them enough that they stop requiring thought. He watched the room fill. Juniors and seniors, mostly. People who'd survived the prerequisite sequence, and had therefore already been through a certain filtering process. One other sophomore, named Barrett something, who sat in the front row and answered questions with the specific confidence of someone who confused speed with depth. A woman in the third row named Priya, who consistently did the best work in the class and seemed to be aware of this in a quiet, factual way, rather than a performed way. Elijah respected that. And at the front, arriving at exactly 2 p.m., with the precision of a man for whom lateness was a personal affront, Professor Douglas Mercer, 58 years old. He didn't look 58. He looked like someone who had decided to be imposing and had made good on that decision through sustained effort over several decades. Average height. But he occupied space differently from average height people. Something in the posture, the deliberateness of movement, the way he set his briefcase on the desk, like it was placing something valuable and wanted you to notice. 20 years of tenure at Crestwood. Published in 6 major mathematical journals. Cited extensively. Known in the field the way certain people are known. Not universally beloved, universally acknowledged. The kind of reputation that opened doors and ended arguments. In the department, among students, the course was called the graveyard, where GPAs went to die. Where ambitious people learned something about the gap between what they thought they were capable of and what was actually required. Mercer liked this. Or rather, Mercer had created it deliberately over 20 years and showed no inclination to change it. He never raised his voice. That was the thing. People who hadn't taken his class imagined something loud, something theatrical. But Mercer's particular genius for making students feel small was quieter than that, more precise. He deployed politeness like a scalpel, finding the exact point of a person's confidence and making an incision so clean they sometimes didn't feel it until they were already bleeding. 3 formal complaints of racial bias in 7 years. All 3 dismissed. Insufficient evidence. That was the phrase. The official language for someone with power has been accused, and the institution has decided that the cost of taking that seriously is higher than the cost of not taking it seriously. Elijah knew about the complaints because he'd looked. He'd spent the first week of the semester doing what he did with any new situation, gathering information, understanding the terrain. The complaints were in public records if you knew where to look. The pattern was visible if you were willing to see it. He was willing. He'd been paying attention for 9 weeks, and what he'd observed was this. Mercer's classroom had rules that weren't in any syllabus. Unofficial rules. Unforced through tone and implication rather than policy. Rules about who got called on and who didn't. Who got the extended explanation and who got the dismissive non-answer. Whose questions were welcomed and whose were redirected with a phrase like perhaps you'd benefit from reviewing the prerequisites. Elijah had said nothing for 9 weeks. Head down. B+ work, invisible, which was the plan, until it stopped being possible to maintain. October 14th, 2024. Monday, 2 p.m. exact, the door opened. Mercer walked in, set his briefcase on the desk with the usual deliberateness. But today something was different, an energy in the room that Elijah noticed immediately, before Mercer had said a word. The particular atmospheric pressure of a room where something has already been decided. Good afternoon, Mercer said. He didn't open his briefcase. He didn't go to the board. He just stood at the front of the room with his hands loose at his sides and looked at the class with the particular look of a man who has already decided how this afternoon is going to go and is taking a moment to enjoy the anticipation. Today we're going to do something a little different. 3 students exchanged glances. The specific glance that means this is not going to be good. I have a problem, Mercer said. A special one. I've kept it for some time, actually, waiting for the right moment. He opened the briefcase. removed a folder, closed the briefcase. Anyone who solves it receives automatic extra credit, enough to guarantee an A for this course. Final grade, no conditions. The room went quiet in a way that had texture, an automatic A in Mercer's class. In 20 years, this offer had never been made. Everyone present knew this because everyone present had asked around before the semester started, had talked to upperclassmen who'd survived the course, had constructed a working mental model of what Mercer would and would not do. An automatic A was not in the model. However, Mercer said, the word landed. If you try and fail and you will fail, you drop one full letter grade immediately. No appeals, no exceptions, no reconsideration regardless of circumstance. Nobody moved, nobody volunteered. 43 people performed the collective act of making themselves as dimensionally small as possible. Mercer scanned the room. Slowly. The scan of a man who already knows where he's going to land but is taking the route deliberately. His eyes stopped. Back row. Far left corner. Elijah. Mr. Cole. 4 seconds. That's how long it took between his name being spoken and the full understanding of what was happening settling over him. And in those 4 seconds, a very fast sequence of thoughts. He knows my name. Of course he knows my name. He knows all their names. That doesn't mean anything. Except he's looking at me like it means something. 9 weeks of invisible and he's looking at me like he knows something. Mr. Cole, Mercer said again. You've been very quiet this semester. Yes, sir. Sitting back there. Doing the minimum. A pause that had a shape to it. Almost like you're hiding something. 42 people turned around. The physics of a room where 42 people rotate to look at the same thing is not subtle. Elijah felt it as a physical fact. The weight of attention, the particular quality of scrutiny that comes when people who have been afraid of something suddenly have someone else to look at. Come to the front. He stood. He walked 20 feet, maybe 25. The walk from the back corner to the front of the room, it felt like considerably more. Mercer handed him the chalk. Their fingers didn't touch, but almost. And the chalk was cold, which was a small and irrelevant detail that Elijah's brain filed and refused to release. This problem, Mercer said, comes from a paper published in 2003. It represents a genuine advance in the field. Mathematicians have worked on it for over 2 decades. PhD candidates have tried. Established professors have tried. He tilted his head slightly. Nobody has produced a satisfactory solution. Then lower, just for Elijah. The class could still hear. The room was quiet enough, but the register shifted. Became something private. Something that was meant to travel only the distance between 2 people. Between you and me. I don't think you'll last 30 seconds. Then back to the room. 5 minutes, Mr. Cole. Impress me, or drop my class today. He stepped to the side and wrote the equation on the board. The chalk moved in his hand, Mercer's hand, writing the equation that had, according to him, defeated professional mathematicians for 21 years. Elijah watched it appear, numbers and symbols spreading across the board in a pattern that grew more complex as it expanded. Not random complexity, designed complexity. The problem that has layers, where solving the visible part reveals something harder hidden underneath, like pulling back a curtain to find another curtain. Pa stood at the board with the chalk in his hand, and everything stopped. Not the stopped of panic, not the stopped of someone who has just been asked something they don't know. The opposite stopped. The stopped of absolute, total, instantaneous recognition. Page 47. Third notebook, upper right corner. His father's handwriting, and unlike most of the notebook, which was dense with small, careful notation, this section had large letters, almost printed. The only time in 7 notebooks that Marcus Cole had departed from his usual hand into something that looked like he was trying to make sure it would be readable later, by someone else, under difficult conditions. This one. Must see finally. Mark 2003. For 4 pages, the solution. Here's what happened inside Elijah Cole in the approximately 6 seconds between recognizing the equation and picking up the chalk. First, shock. Not the dramatic kind, the cold kind, the kind that moves through you like water finding level. Then, understanding, the full, awful, beautiful shape of it. Not just I know this problem. Not just my father worked on this. But the complete picture assembling itself in real time. His father, this equation, this building, this man standing 3 feet away with his arms crossed. March 2003. The problem had been published in 2003. Mercer said so. Mercer had just said a paper published in 2003. His father had solved it. In March 2003, in notebooks that had been sitting in an attic in a cardboard box, marked keep for over 20 years. The math arrived faster than the implications. Then something else. Underneath the shock and the understanding. Something quieter and older and harder to name. Something that lived in the part of him that had been reading his father's handwriting for 6 years and had slowly, without entirely meaning to, learned to think in his father's patterns. A presence, a frequency. The thing that was as close to his father's voice as he was ever going to get. Numbers don't lie, son. People do. His hand steadied. He started writing. The room changed, not with any announcement, not with anything that could be pointed to as a single moment, but something shifted in the quality of attention from the 42 people watching from their seats. And that shift was visible in the way people shift when what they expected to happen is no longer what's happening. Someone leaned forward, then someone else. Then Priya in the third row set down her pen. The approach Elijah was using wasn't in any textbook. It didn't follow the standard framework for this class of problem, but came at the equation from an angle, sideways, diagonal, almost, that reframed the relationship between the variables in a way that made the apparent complexity dissolve, not by simplifying it, by changing the perspective until what had looked like a wall looked like a door. Method C, his father's method. 21 years old and unpublished because the person who developed it had been removed from the building before he could publish it. 40 seconds. Mercer had gone still. Not his normal teaching stillness. Something different. Something that had moved past stillness into something harder to categorize. Elijah could see it peripherally without looking directly. The particular quality of a person who is seeing something they recognize and cannot account for recognizing. 60 seconds. The board was filling. The solution taking shape the way a photograph develops in a dark room. Not all at once, not in pieces, but gradually, continuously, until suddenly you can see the whole thing and you don't know exactly when it became visible. 78 seconds. A sound from somewhere in the room. Not a word, just a breath. Someone's breath-changing character. 88 seconds. That's not... Mercer started, then stopped himself. 94 seconds. Elijah set the chalk down on the tray below the board. He stepped back. He turned around. The classroom was completely silent. The quality of silence that doesn't happen very often. The silence of 42 people who have just watched something that has displaced their understanding of what was possible and haven't yet developed the language to discuss it. Mercer was looking at the board. His eyes moved across it. First pass fast, second pass slower, line by line, checking each transformation against what you're following each step the way you're hoping is wrong, but already know isn't. The first transformation, correct. The second, correct. The third and fourth together, correct. And this was the part Elijah watched happen on his face in the specific slow motion of something you can't look away from. Not just correct, but elegant. The solution covered the ground in fewer steps than any published approach, because it didn't use a published approach. It used an approach that existed in exactly 7 notebooks in a cardboard box, and in the memory of a 19-year-old who had spent 6 years learning to read his dead father's mind. That's not possible. Osser's voice had changed. Not dramatically, but the professional surface of it had developed a crack. Something was coming through the crack that didn't belong in this room, in this performance, in this carefully maintained arrangement of power. You can verify it, sir, Elijah said. His voice came out level. He was briefly surprised by this. Every step is shown. I know every step is shown. The crack widened slightly. That's not what I'm. He stopped. Reset. The professional surface reasserting itself through what was clearly an act of will. The method. That approach. That is not in any textbook I am aware of. No, sir. Then where? Not a question with rising inflection, statement with a period. The specific syntax of a man who already suspects the answer and is asking anyway because he needs to hear it said out loud. My father taught me. Beat your father. Yes, sir. His name. And there it was. His name. Not who is your father. The phrasing of a person who has a specific name in mind, who is asking not for information but for confirmation. Elijah looked at Mercer directly. Marcus Cole, he said. 1 second. 1 second was all it lasted. But Elijah had spent 19 years in where he needed to read people faster than they knew they were being read. He'd learned to notice the things that people didn't intend to show. The involuntary things. The ones that existed in the half second before the mask came back up. And in that 1 second, behind Douglas Mercer's eyes, recognition, immediate and total. Fear, the specific fear of someone who has just encountered something they buried long ago. And something else. Something that moved too fast to fully identify before it was gone. Something that might have been, in a different person, in a different life, something close to guilt. Then the mask came back up completely. Practiced. 20 years of practice. Class dismissed, Mercer said. Everyone out, now. The room emptied with impressive speed. 42 people converting classroom energy into corridor energy in under 90 seconds. Bags grabbed, chairs scraped. The particular velocity of people who've witnessed something unresolved and want to be in the hallway to discuss it. Elijah moved toward the door with the rest of them. Mr. Cole. He stopped. The room was nearly empty. 2 students still gathering their things near the middle, Mercer at the front. The board behind him still covered with the solution to a problem that had supposedly defeated mathematicians for 21 years. You'll be hearing from me. Not loud. Not angry. Calibrated. The tone of a person delivering information rather than making a threat, even though the information was a threat. Elijah nodded once, walked out. The corridor of Whitfield Hall at 2:34 p.m. on a Monday, students moving, voices, the normal sounds of a building in the middle of its day. Elijah walked through it without stopping, through the main doors, out onto the path that ran along the side of the building, where the October trees had gone the particular red and orange of mid-autumn. And the air had a cold edge that meant November was approaching. He found a bench, sat down, put his bag on the ground, looked at his hands completely steady, which was interesting, because under the surface of steady, everything was moving very fast. Thoughts arriving in no particular order and needing to be sorted. The equation on the board. Page 47. March 2003. A Mercer's voice. A paper published in 2003. The look on Mercer's face when he heard the name Marcus Cole. That look. Elijah had filed it immediately, stored it in the part of his mind where he kept things that needed to be examined later, when he had more information, when the full shape of something became clearer. He reached into his bag, pulled out the notebook, opened it to the first page. Marcus Cole, Crestwood University, September 2001. Her father had been here, in this building, in this department. Walking these paths, he turned pages carefully, gently. The way you handle something that is both important and fragile. Near the end of the second notebook, a margin note he'd read dozens of times, but which now had a different weight. Met with depth. Advisor today, D. Mercer. Seems sharp, hard to read, but interested in the work. Wait, D. Mercer. Douglas Mercer, his father's advisor, right here. The same man who had just written an equation on a board. Same man, face done involuntary at the sound of a name he recognized. Elijah sat with that. The cold moved through the October air. A leaf came off a branch nearby and took its time reaching the ground. He thought about the note in the attic box, the one in his father's handwriting near the back of the 5th notebook. If this goes wrong, and it might, the notebooks are the proof. All of it, dates and everything. Anyone who looks will see. This goes wrong. What had his father been afraid would go wrong, and? Had it? He closed the notebook, put it back in his bag. Sat on the bench for another minute, watching the leaves, watching students move past on their way to wherever they were going next. Then he stood up, walked back toward his apartment. Because here is what Elijah Cole knew at 2:52 p.m. on October 14th, 2024, with 94 seconds of chalk marks still sitting on a blackboard in room 118. He didn't have all the pieces yet. He didn't have the full picture. He didn't have allies or evidence, or any of the things that would eventually be required. What he had was a notebook with his father's handwriting in it, a look on a powerful man's face that had lasted 1 second too long, and something his grandmother had told him when he was 8 years old, on a hot porch, in the particular slow voice of someone who had already learned everything she was about to say, through the hardest possible means. Don't let them see everything you've got. Save it for when it counts. Well, he'd been saving for 6 years. And something told him the same instinct that had been keeping him alive in rooms like that one for as long as he could remember. Something told him that the moment he'd been saving for had just walked up and introduced itself, in 94 seconds, on a Monday afternoon, in a room where someone had expected him to fail. He walked home, took the stairs 2 at a time, which he never did, and sat down at his desk and opened the notebook to page 1. and began, for the first time, to read it like it was evidence. The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. the following day. Elijah was standing in the east corridor of Whitfield Hall between classes, coffee in his left hand. Purchased, but not yet opened. One of those small economic decisions that make sense at the moment and stops making sense immediately afterward. He was thinking about a problem from his topology reading, not the Mercer problem. The actual assigned problem. The one that had a clean answer if you approached it correctly. His phone buzzed. He looked down. Office of Academic Integrity, Crestwood University, Object Academic Integrity, immediate meeting required. Cole, Elise Eam Advanced Theory, a math wait. He read it once, opened the coffee, took a sip. It was too hot. He didn't register that it was too hot until about 30 seconds after it had already happened, which told him something about where his attention currently was. Academic integrity violation. The phrase had specific institutional weight. It didn't mean we have questions. It didn't mean please clarify. It meant a formal complaint has been filed. A process has been initiated. And that process, if it reached its logical conclusion, ended in one place. Permanent expulsion. Transcript notation that would follow him everywhere, into every application, every opportunity, every room he tried to enter for the rest of his professional life. I stood in the corridor for what might have been 2 minutes or 10. Let the full shape of it settle. Mercer hadn't waited, hadn't gathered additional evidence, hadn't considered alternative explanations, or given the situation time to breathe. He'd gone directly to the mechanism most likely to produce the outcome he wanted, and he'd done it in less than 24 hours, which meant one of two things. Either this was a reflexive response, the immediate instinct of a man who felt threatened and had a weapon close at hand, or it was a practiced one, the response of a man who had done this for and knew exactly which steps to take and in which order. Elijah thought about the 3 dismissed complaints, the pattern he'd identified in the first week of the semester, the quality of deliberateness in every move Mercer made. Probably both, he thought. Reflexive and practiced at the same time. He put his phone in his pocket, threw away the coffee I'd paid $3 for and hadn't tasted, and walked to his next class. Because collapsing in a corridor wasn't going to solve anything. And he had never been the kind of person who collapsed in corridors. The meeting was at 4 p.m. the next day. Mercer's office. Second floor of Whitfield Hall. The corner office, of course it was the corner office, south and east facing windows. Good light, the kind of space that says I have been here long enough to earn this view and means it as an assertion of hierarchy rather than a simple statement of fact. The furniture was arranged in a specific way. Mercer behind his desk, the visitor's chair placed at a slight angle that put the visitor at a disadvantage without doing so in any way that could be specifically named or complained about. The effect was subtle. It was also not accidental. Elijah recognized it. He sat in the angled chair and made sure his posture communicated nothing useful. Let me be direct, Mercer said, please. Your solution in my classroom 2 days ago was too perfect, too fast, too sophisticated for a student at your level. He had his hands folded on the desk, controlled, measured. The composed presentation of a man who has prepared this performance carefully. On 20 years of teaching this material, I have evaluated thousands of students. I know what they are capable of. I know what they are not. I didn't cheat, then explain it. The folded hands didn't move. Explain to me, Mr. Cole, how a sophomore, scholarship student, no mathematical pedigree, no formal advanced training beyond what this institution has provided, since 94 seconds that has occupied professional mathematicians for over 2 decades, without external help, without prior exposure to the solution. I told you, my father. He reached for the folder on his desk, opened it with the precision of someone who has rehearsed even this gesture. A dead man, convenient. A source that cannot be questioned, cannot be verified, cannot be cross-examined. It's the truth. Here is what I believe is the truth. He slid a document across the desk. I believe you found that solution somewhere. Online, in an archive, in an obscure secondary source. I believe you memorized it. And I believe you waited for a moment of maximum visibility to deploy it. Because you wanted to make a statement, wanted to prove something. Elijah looked at the document, Eismine, his name at the top, the language clinical and devastating, fraud, misconduct, misrepresentation of academic work. Words arranged with the precision of someone who had arranged words like these before, and knew exactly how each one landed. You have 2 weeks, Mercer said. Convince the academic integrity panel that your abilities are genuine, that what happened in my classroom was authentic. If you cannot, he paused. Just long enough. I'd suggest keeping that warehouse job. Elijah looked up from the document. My father was a mathematician, he said. He worked on that exact problem. This university, in this department. He kept his voice level. He had practiced level. You know that. You know who he was. Something moved across Mercer's face. Quickly. Gone almost before it registered. I've never heard of your father. His name was Marcus Cole. He was in the graduate program here beginning in 2001. You were his academic advisor. I said. I have your signature in his research notebook, Professor. Elijah didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. October 2002. You signed off on his work. You wrote exceptional methodology in the margin. The office was very quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of 2 people who have reached an understanding. The specific quiet of a space in which something has been said that can't be unsaid. And both parties are aware of this, and only one of them knows yet what it means. This meeting, Mercer said slowly, is over. He stood, walked to the door, opened it. You'll receive formal notice of the hearing within 48 hours. I strongly suggest using that time to consider whether continuing this process serves your interests. Elijah stood. He walked to the door, stopped. Just like who? Mercer looked at him. In the classroom, after I solved the equation, you told me to drop the course, save myself, just like, and then you stopped. Elijah held the man's gaze with the steadiness of someone who has nothing left to perform. Just like who, Professor? A long moment. The door was open. The corridor was visible. Normal university sounds from somewhere beyond it. Get out of my office, Mr. Cole. The formal notice arrived 41 hours later, not 41, which communicated something about eagerness that Elijah filed carefully. Hearing date, November 29th, 2024, 9 a.m. Room 204, Administration Building. He checked his calendar. November 29th, the day after Thanksgiving. He sat with that information for 30 seconds. Just 30. Then he started making calls. Office of Academic Integrity. Closed for the holiday break. Please leave a message and we will return your call after November 30th. Student Advocacy Center. Voicemail. Our office will reopen December 2nd. Legal Aid Services. I will return your call after the break. Expected response time 5 to 7 business days. Dean's office. An actual human voice which felt briefly like progress. The schedule is non-negotiable given the serious nature of the allegations, Mr. Cole. We understand the timing is not ideal. Not ideal. He thanked her, hung up, set his phone face down on the desk. Outside the window, November was establishing itself with no particular sentiment. The trees near the parking lot had shed most of their leaves. The ones remaining were hanging on with the specific tenacity of things that know they're losing, but haven't quite accepted it yet. He thought about what his grandmother had told him. Not the thing about not showing everything you had. The other thing, the thing she'd said once quietly, when he was about 15 and had come home from school, with a look on his face that had her stop what she was doing and look at him carefully. The system isn't broken, baby, she'd said. It's working exactly the way it was designed to work. That's the harder thing to accept. But it's what's true. He hadn't fully understood it then. He understood it now. The November 29th hearing date wasn't an administrative oversight. It wasn't poor planning. It was the system working exactly the way it was designed to work. Empty campus, closed offices, no witnesses, no advocacy, no one watching. Buried it quiet. During a holiday, while everyone was somewhere else, his father had known this, had felt this same machinery moving against him 21 years ago. The thought didn't make Elijah feel less alone exactly, but it made him feel less insane. Less like the problem was his perception of what was happening, rather than what was actually happening. He opened his laptop, began an email. I am writing to formally withdraw from. He stopped, looked at the sentence, looked at it for a long time. Then he closed the laptop without finishing it. Not yet. Not yet. What happened next was the part that nobody talks about when they tell stories like this one. Everyone wants to skip to the hearing, the confrontation, the moment of justice. Nobody wants to sit in the part that comes before that, the weeks in between, where nothing is resolved and everything is uncertain, and the world has quietly rearranged itself to communicate, in dozens of small ways, that you are now a person in trouble, and people in trouble are to be handled carefully from a distance. His study group stopped responding to messages. Not dramatically. Just, the messages went blue and stayed that way. His lab partner for the physics course sent a text. Hey, talk to the prof, and I think it's better if we just both work independently for the rest of the semester. Good luck with everything. Good luck with everything. 3 days after the formal notice, his manager at the print shop called him into the back office. Hard, you're having some trouble at school. I'm fine. Right. Darnell wouldn't look directly at him. Shuffled papers that didn't need shuffling. Thing is, we've been restructuring some of the overnight shifts. Might mean some changes for your schedule. How much notice will I get? We'll try to give you as much as we can. He walked home from that conversation in the dark, cold enough that his breath was visible. Small clouds appearing and disappearing with each exhale. This was how it worked. Not with anything you could point to. Not with any single act that could be named as discrimination or retaliation or cruelty. Just the slow withdrawal of the ordinary scaffolding of a life. The incremental communication that you would become someone for whom scaffolding was no longer readily available. Arthur had spent 20 years learning to do this without leaving fingerprints, and Elijah was learning, in real time, exactly how effective the technique was. On the 7th night after the formal notice, he sat on the floor. Not the desk, not the chair. The floor, which was unusual for him. He was a desk person, a chipper person, someone who associated the floor with having given up. But the desk felt wrong, and the chair felt wrong, and the floor was the most honest available surface. All 7 of his father's notebooks spread around him. He'd arranged them in order. September 2001 through early 2003. His father's handwriting moving through them. Exhilarating as the ideas built, the margins filling, whole pages of notation, dense enough that you had to tilt the notebook to follow where a particular line of thinking had gone when it ran out of room at the edge of the page. He wasn't reading them tonight. He was just with them, the way you're sometimes with the things that belong to people you've lost. Not using them, just being near them. Because tonight the notebooks felt less like evidence and more like the only company available. His laptop was on the desk, the unfinished email open, the cursor blinking at the end of the word from. He looked at it from across the room. Maybe they're right. The thought arrived without invitation. The way these thoughts do when you're tired enough and alone enough, and the machinery of institutional pressure has been running long enough. Maybe a person like me doesn't belong in a room like this. Maybe that's just the truth, and all the notebooks in the world don't change it. He looked at his father's handwriting. Page 34. The equations he had memorized. The margin note in the cramped corner script his father used when he was excited about something. This is it. This is the one. Can feel it. His father had felt it. And then what happened had happened. And then it had happened again. To Elijah, 21 years later, in the same building. Don't make my mistake, the letter said. Except he hadn't found the letter yet. The letter was still in the box, waiting. He called his mother at 11:43 p.m. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been awake. She was often awake at this hour, had been since his father died. A change in her relationship with sleep that she'd never fully described, but that Elijah had observed across years of early morning phone calls that were somehow never surprising to her. Elijah, just his name, but with something in it. The particular maternal frequency that reads the emotional content of a single word before the conversation has properly begun. I need to ask you something about Dad. Silence. Long silence. The kind with texture. The kind of silence a person makes when they have been waiting for a specific question and are deciding in real time whether they have the resources to answer it. Why are you bringing this up now? Because a professor at Crestwood is trying to expel me. He's accusing me of cheating. And when I told him Dad's name, Elijah paused. He looked terrified, Mom, like he'd seen something he thought was buried. The silence changed quality. What's the professor's name? Mercer. Douglas Mercer. A sound on the other end. Brief. Not quite a word. The sound a person makes when something confirms something they'd hoped would never need to be confirmed. Come home this weekend. Tell me now. Not over the phone. Her voice had moved to a register he recognized. The flat, careful voice she used when she was keeping herself from feeling something at full volume. Come home, please. Are things I should have told you a long time ago. Things about your father, about that man. What things, Elijah? Mom, A pause. Come home. Drove 4 hours on Saturday morning. Left at 6 a.m. The highway was quiet. That particular early weekend quiet when the world hasn't committed to being awake yet. He drove with the radio off. His head was already full. More noise wouldn't have helped. He thought about the notebooks. About the note on page 1 of the 5th. Met with debt advisor today. D. Mercer. Seems sharp. Hard to read. But interested in the work. About the note on the last written page. If this goes wrong, and it might, the notebooks are the proof. All of it. Father had known something was going to go wrong. And it had. And then his father had died, 6 years after leaving Swood, in a way that his mother had never explained, and his grandmother had described only as. He couldn't fight anymore. He drove. The landscape changed the way it always did on this route. From city density to suburb, to that specific nowhere of interstate highway, where the only things visible are road and tree line, and the occasional overpass with graffiti that might have been there for years. He arrived at 10:17 a.m. His mother was at the kitchen table, the table where he'd eaten dinner for the first 12 years of his life, where he'd done homework, where his grandmother had sat across from him with iced tea and let him read notebooks in silence. The table that had, for him, emotional weight. Certain objects acquire when enough life has happened around them. A cardboard box was on it, one he had never seen before, larger than the attic box, older. The cardboard had gone slightly soft at the corners with age, no marking on the outside. Just the box, on the table, closed, with his mother's hands resting on top of it, and her face doing something he recognized as the face of a person who has carried something alone for a long time and is about to put it down. Sit, she said. He sat. She looked at the box for a moment, then she opened it. Letters, photographs, documents. A university ID card, his father at 21, photographed in whatever institutional space Crestwood used for ID cards in 2001. Slightly formal. The specific expression of someone told to look at a camera who isn't entirely sure what to do with their face. But the eyes. His eyes. Exactly his eyes. He'd seen photographs before, a few, but not this one. And something about seeing his father's face in this specific context, young, at Crestwood, at the beginning of something, produced a quality of feeling that he didn't try to immediately process. He set the photograph aside, carefully. His mother reached into the box, pulled out a document with the Crestwood University letterhead, a research proposal cover sheet, rubber banded to several pages of dense notation. She set it on the table. Then another document, a form printed on official letterhead. Office of Academic Integrity, Crestwood University. Formal complaint filing, dated February 14, 2003. Then a letter. The kind of letter that exists in only one context. Single page, Crestwood University letterhead. The language of institutional finality. Dear Mr. Cole, following the investigation into academic misconduct, your enrollment at Crestwood University is hereby terminated. Effective March 1, 2003. You are hereby prohibited from accessing university facilities or representing yourself as a student or affiliate of this institution. He read the signature at the bottom. Douglas Mercer, department chair. Mad, his blood went cold. Slowly, specifically. The way cold moves through water, finding its level, filling the available space. He was Dad's advisor, Elijah said. More than that, Diane said. Her hands were flat on the table, not moving. The stillness of someone who has rehearsed this, has been rehearsing it for years, and is now executing the rehearsal. Your father developed something extraordinary. A equation you solved in that classroom. He'd been working on it for almost 2 years, had cracked it, was ready to publish, ready to put his name on something that would have changed everything for him. And Mercer took it. He published it under his own name. April 2003. The method, the approach, the result. All of it yours. None of the credit. She paused. When Marcus tried to fight back, filed a complaint, provided documentation, Mercer accused him of plagiarism, said your father had copied from him. His own work. His own work. The kitchen was very still. Outside, the sounds of a Saturday morning neighborhood. A dog somewhere, a car starting. The university believed the tenured white professor, Diane continued. Her voice had gone flat in a particular way. Not emotionless, but the emotion compressed to almost nothing by the weight of the years she'd spent carrying it. No real investigation, no fair hearing. Your father submitted every piece of documentation he had. It didn't matter. 2 weeks after he filed the complaint, he was expelled, blacklisted from the department. Mercer made sure every door in the field was closed. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out quieter than he intended. Because I was afraid. She said it without hesitation, without apology. The directness of someone who has decided that softening it further would be its own kind of dishonesty. I was afraid that if you knew, you would go there, to that school, to that man, and I would lose you the way I lost him. Elijah looked at his hands on the table, his father's hands. The same proportion of palm to finger, same particular angle at the wrist. How did he die, Mom? She had been waiting for this question since he walked in the door. Maybe since he was old enough to ask it. He tried to move on, she said. After Crestwood. He got a job, we met, we built something. And for a while, it seemed like maybe new thing could outweigh the old thing. You arrived. And Elijah, he loved you in a way I don't have the right words for. She stopped, breathed. But the knowledge that his work was out there with someone else's name on it, that every time a mathematician cited that paper, they were crediting the man who destroyed him. It was like a splinter that kept working itself deeper. He couldn't get it out, couldn't stop feeling it, couldn't find his way to a place where it didn't matter. She met his eyes. He left, said he couldn't fight anymore, said the system had won and he was too tired to disagree. The kitchen absorbed that. Elijah sat with it. His father, 31 years old, brilliant enough to crack a problem that had stumped the field, destroyed by a man who had the institutional authority to make the theft permanent and the accusation stick. 6 years of trying to build a life on top of that wound, and then he couldn't fight anymore. There's one more thing, Diane said. She reached to the bottom of the box, pulled out an envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed. On the front, in handwriting that stopped Elijah's breath for one full second. To Elijah, when he's ready. His father had written this. Knowing he might not be here when Elijah was old enough to read it, he opened it carefully. Like the paper itself was something that could be damaged by haste. The handwriting inside was smaller than in the notebooks, more controlled. The handwriting of someone choosing every word with full awareness of what they were doing. Son, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I tried. For a while I really believed I could build something that would outweigh what they'd taken. I couldn't. They took my work, my name, the future I'd spent years building toward. And then, this is the part that shames me most. They took my will to keep going. And I let them. I told myself the system had already decided, and there was nothing left to do. And once you start believing that, it becomes very hard to come back from. But here is what they did not take. You. And what is already in you. I saw it before you could walk. The way your eyes tracked patterns. The way you reached for my notebooks. Before you could even understand what they were. You have the gift, the real one. The kind that doesn't come from instruction. One day you will be better than I ever was. I believe that completely. And when they come for you, because they will, son, because what happened to me wasn't random. It was the way things are arranged. And the arrangement doesn't change because you're my child instead of me. When they come, don't disappear. Don't make my mistake. Fight. Even when it hurts, even when you're alone. Even when every seems closed and every voice, including your own sometimes, says it's not worth it. Fight. Because giving up isn't peace, it's just another kind of death, and you deserve more than that. I love you more than I knew how to say while I was here to say it. Bad. Elijah sat at his mother's kitchen table for a long time after that. His mother didn't try to fill the silence. She understood, had understood for years probably, that there were no words that would make this better, and that attempting them would be worse than offering nothing. So she offered nothing, and he sat and read the letter again. And then again, the handwriting that was the same handwriting from the notebooks. His father's mind, his father's voice, reaching forward across 14 years to find him in exactly the moment it needed to. Don't disappear. Don't make my mistake. He folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, put the envelope in the front pocket of his bag, where he kept the photograph. Then he looked at his mother. I'm not going to withdraw, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said. I've known since you called me. You're scared, I'm terrified, she said. And I'm proud. Both things at once. I've been both things at once for 19 years. He reached across the table, put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over, held his, like his grandmother had held his, at 6 years old in a room full of white flowers. The same grip, the same message. I'm here? Hold on. He drove back Sunday evening, 4 hours, radio off again. A box of documents on the passenger seat. His mother had given him everything, all of it, the research proposal, the complaint, the termination letter, the photographs. Evidence that had been sitting in a cardboard box for over 20 years, waiting for someone to use it. He got back to his apartment at 9:30 p.m., sat at his desk, organized everything. His father's research proposal, October 2002, submitted to the mathematics department at Crestwood. The methodology described in precise detail. The approach that solved the equation. Method C, pages of notation that matched. Line by line, the notation in the 7th notebook. A Mercer's publication, April 2003. Elijah had pulled it from the journal database. Read it 3 times. Same methodology, same approach, results. Different name. His father's complaint, February 2003. Formal, official, documented. I hereby allege that my doctoral advisor, Professor Douglas Mercer, has obtained and used my unpublished research without attribution or consent. The dismissal notice, insufficient evidence. The termination letter, 2 weeks later. The timeline was there. Clear, sequential. Anyone who looked would see it. But he knew in the specific way of someone who had been paying attention to how power worked for 19 years, that having the evidence wasn't the same as having the ability to use it. Not against someone with Mercer's tenure, connections, and 2 decades of institutional armor. I needed someone inside, someone with credentials, someone who could stand in a room with Mercer and not be dismissed. He opened his laptop, pulled up the Crestwood Mathematics faculty directory, read through it slowly. Most of the names he already knew from the semester. Standard faculty. Tenured, mostly. The careful network of professional relationships that constituted a department. People who had worked together long enough that certain alliances and antagonisms had calcified into permanent features of the landscape. Then one name, Dr. Camille Osei, Associate Professor of Applied Mathematics, MIT, Ph.D. Office, Whitfield Hall 3-1-C. He'd heard her name twice since the semester started. Both times in the context of someone who didn't play the political games that most faculty had long since concluded were mandatory. Both times, with a specific tone that people use when they're describing someone suspect, but aren't entirely sure what to do with. He'd also noticed, reading the faculty bios carefully, that she had been at Crestwood since 2004, 1 year after everything. He checked the clock. 11:52 p.m. Too late to call, not too late to email. He began typing, Dr. Osei, my name is Elijah Cole. You don't know me. I'm a sophomore in the mathematics program. Professor Mercer has filed an academic integrity complaint against me, and I have reason to believe it is not only false, but connected to something that happened in this department in 2003. Something involving my father. His name was Marcus Cole. He stopped, looked at the paragraph, added one line. I think you might know who that is, and I think you might be the only person here who will tell me the truth about what happened to him. He sent it. Then he turned off the lamp, lay down on his bed without changing clothes, stared at the ceiling. The water stain that had been there since September, the bent-necked lamp throwing its angled shadow. His phone was on the nightstand. Silent, he closed his eyes, didn't sleep, not really. Dr. Camille Osei's reply arrived at 6:23 a.m. 3 sentences. Mr. Cole, I know who your father was. Come to my office at 8 a.m. She was 48 years old, which was not information Elijah had researched, but which he could have estimated reasonably accurately from looking at her. The kind of face that carried its age visibly and well. The face of someone who had been through enough that the evidence of it had become a feature rather than a cost. Sharp eyes. The kind of stillness that came from having learned, in environments that did not always welcome her, exactly how to occupy a room. The office was small, books everywhere. The accumulation of a working mathematician's library, organized in a system that probably made sense to her and would have taken anyone else days to decode. One photograph on the desk. A group of graduate students in what looked like a departmental hallway. Mid-law. Informal. Someone had called out to them. He recognized the one at the left edge of the frame immediately. His father, 21 years old. The eyes he'd been looking at in the kitchen photograph for 24 hours. Close the door, she said. He did sit down. He sat. Tell me everything, from the beginning. He talked for 31 minutes. She didn't interrupt once. He told her about the classroom, the equation, Mercer's face, the email, the November 29th hearing date, his mother's box, the research proposal, the complaint, the termination letter, his father's letter, all of it in order, as precisely as he could. Then he stopped and waited. She was looking at the photograph on her desk, specifically at his father. You knew him, Elijah said. Not a question. I was a graduate student here in 2000, she said finally. I arrived in 2001, same year as your father. Different program focus, but the same department. She set the photograph down, carefully, with both hands. He was the most gifted mathematician I had encountered in 4 years of graduate study. And I had encountered some gifted mathematicians. What happened? Mercer happened. Her voice was flat. Not cold, something flatter than cold. Something that comes from the other side of cold, after you've been there long enough. Your father had developed something real, something that could have made his name, and Mercer was his advisor, had full access to the work, and he took it. And when Dad tried to fight back, when Marcus tried to fight back, Mercer accused him of stealing his own work. She said it the way you say something you've said in your own head so many times that the words have lost their shock value, while somehow retaining all their weight. And the university believed the tenured professor. The office was quiet. You were here, Elijah said. Yes. You saw what happened. Yes. He didn't say the next thing. He let the silence hold it. She answered it anyway. I was 27 years old, she said, a black woman in a mathematics department that regarded my presence as a diversity accommodation rather than an intellectual contribution. I had a fellowship that could be revoked, a dissertation that wasn't finished, a career that was entirely contingent on not making the wrong enemies. She paused. I told myself I didn't have enough evidence. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself there was nothing I could do. She met his eyes. Every single one of those things was true, and every single one of them was also a way of not doing what I knew was right. You let him lose everything. She didn't flinch, didn't deflect, just held his gaze. Yes, I did. 3 words. Carrying 21 years, he believed her. Not because the admission was dramatic, because it wasn't, because she said it the way people say things that have been true for so long that performing them differently isn't possible anymore. I need someone with credentials, Elijah said. Someone Mercer can't dismiss. Someone who can stand in a room with him and not be ignored. I know. Can you be that person? She was quiet for a moment. She picked up the copy of his father's research proposal. The one from October 2000. Read the date, read the methodology description, read the name at the top. Then she set it down and picked up her phone. His name is Dr. Bernard Ashby, she said. A Mite Emeritus. 71 years old. He was my doctoral advisor. He is one of 3 or 4 people in this country whose opinion on a mathematical question Merce cannot dismiss. Will he help? I don't know. She was already dialing. He's semi-retired. He doesn't do favors. He doesn't take meetings that aren't worth his time. She paused, listening to it ring. But for something like this, for a chance to correct something that should have been corrected 21 years ago. She held up one finger. Bernard, it's Camille. A pause. She listened. Yes, it's been too long, I know. I need you to hear something. Academic fraud, going back to 2003. The son of the original victim. A longer pause. Her expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders shifted. His name is Marcus Cole. 10 seconds of silence. Then Dr. Osei's face shifted. Not dramatically, just slightly. The shift of someone who's just heard the answer they needed. Thank you, Bernard. I'll send everything tonight. She hung up, looked at Elijah. He's assembling a panel. 3 mathematicians. Independent evaluation. You'll have 48 hours to prepare. The first real breath in days. There's a complication, she said. Of course. One of the panel member, Bernard's second choice for independent validation is Dr. Thaddeus Wren, Princeton. Number theory specialist. She paused. He was in the graduate program here in 2001, same year as your father. Elijah went still. He knew him, possibly well. I don't know where Wren stands after 21 years. He could be an ally. He could be a witness. She met his eyes directly. He could also be someone who made a choice in 2003 and has spent 2 decades making peace with it, and who might, when faced with the consequences of changing his position, decide the peace is worth keeping. Elijah thought about his father's letter. When they come for you, because they will. Fight. 48 hours, he said. 48 hours. He picked up the documents from her desk, stacked them carefully, put them in his bag next to the envelope, next to the photograph, Dr. Osei. She looked at him. Why now? Why are you helping now after 21 years? She was quiet for a moment. Because you walked into my office, she said. And you showed me evidence that I'd told myself for 20 years didn't exist in a form anyone could use. She looked at the photograph on her desk one more time. And because I'm tired of being someone who knows the right thing and does the easier one. She looked back at him. Go prepare 48 hours. He spent those 48 hours the way he'd spent the last 6 years. Alone, with notebooks, with pencil and paper, working, not reviewing what he already knew. He knew it. The preparation wasn't about knowledge. It was about access. About making sure that what he knew could move from his mind to his hand without the interference of fear or pressure or the weight of everything that was at stake. He spread the notebooks across his desk, cross-referenced every equation against Mercer's publication, his father's research proposal against the paper, the dates against each other, the methodology against itself, the proof that it was the same, that it came from the same mind, that the only question was which name belonged on it. His father's. It had always only been his father's. He worked until 3 a.m. on the first night, slept 4 hours, worked again, and on the second evening, in the last hour before he made himself stop and sleep, he opened the letter one more time, read it, folded it, put it back, and made himself a promise, not out loud, not with any ceremony, just internally, the way the promises you're going to keep are made. Whatever happened in that conference room tomorrow, whatever Wren turned out to be, whatever Ashby concluded, whatever Mercer had arranged, he was not going to disappear. His father had asked him not to, and he was not going to break that. November 27th, 2024, 7:52 in the morning. Elijah sat in the parking lot outside the Hargrove Conference Center in Dr. Osei's borrowed Subaru and looked at the building and did not move for approximately 4 minutes. Not because he was afraid, because he wanted to do this one thing deliberately, to choose, with full knowledge of what he was walking into, to open the door and get out, which he did. Cold air, real November cold, the kind that has a position on your life. He pulled his jacket tighter, walked toward the entrance, front pocket of his bag, 1 photograph, 1 letter, 7 notebooks, because they'd gotten him this far, and he wasn't leaving them in a car. Second floor, conference room, Dr. Osei already there, coffee untouched, 3 people at the table, Dr. Bernard at Ashby, 71, white-haired. The stillness of someone who had been the most formidable person in every room for so long he no longer needed to perform it. He looked at Elijah the way you look at something you're genuinely curious about. No warmth, no coldness, just attention. Dr. Patricia Holt, 54, Stanford. Red pen behind her ear she'd forgotten about. Zero patience for anything that wasn't true. And Dr. Thaddeus Wren. Princeton silver hair. Deep-set eyes doing something complicated when Elijah walked in. The face of a man who has been bracing for a specific impact for a very long time and has just felt the first tremor. Mr. Cole, Ashby said. Sit down, he sat. We're here to determine whether your mathematical abilities are genuine. We have no stake in the outcome. Are here for the truth. I understand. Ashby slid a sheet of paper across the table. Then let's begin. Problem 1. Elliptic curves, graduate level. Elijah picked up his pencil. Steady. Because he hadn't learned mathematics the way you learn a subject. He'd learned it the way you learn a language, when it's the only way to communicate with someone you love. The notebooks weren't textbooks. They were conversations. He started writing. The approach came sideways, reframing the variables until the complexity dissolved, not by simplifying it, by changing the angle until the wall became a door. Method C, his father's signature, now is 43 minutes. Expected time, 90. Dr. Holt raised one eyebrow, wrote something down on problem modular arithmetic. Elijah found the shortcut at minute 22, something from notebook 4. Something that had never been published because the person who developed it had been expelled before he could publish it. 68 minutes. Ashby had moved closer to the table at some point. Elijah hadn't noticed when. He just looked up and found the old man leaning forward. Problem 3. Open-ended proof construction. No correct answer. Just show how you think. This was the one that couldn't be faked. Elijah closed his eyes for 10 seconds. Thought about his father at 23. In this building, believing the work would be enough. He opened his eyes, began to write, and 22 minutes total. He set down the pencil. Done. Wait outside, Ashby said. Vague hallway. Uncertain water fountain. Dr. Osei with a bottle of water she handed him without being asked. He drank half. They didn't talk much. Past the point where talking helped. 30 minutes became 45, 45 became an hour, then the door opened. Not Ashby. Wren. He stepped into the hallway alone, looked at Osei first. Something passed between them. Then he looked at Elijah. Mr. Cole, can I speak with you privately? OC's chin came up. Whatever you need to say, please. The word cracked slightly. This is personal. They walked to the far end of the hallway, window overlooking a courtyard. Bare trees, November doing what November does. Ren stood with his back to the glass. Couldn't look at Elijah directly. Kept trying and stopping. I knew your father. 4 words. The hallway went quiet around them. Same program, 2001. He was the best mathematician I had encountered in 8 years in this field. I say that with full understanding of what it means. And when Mercer destroyed him, we knew. Not suspected. Knew. The work was Marcus's, all of it, and you said nothing. Not an accusation, a statement. Flat on the floor between them. No, Friend said, none of us did. He finally met Elijah's eyes. His own were full. We were building careers. Mercer had power. Filing a complaint against your advisor meant losing everything. So you protected your futures. Yes, small, specific, and left a 23-year-old man alone with what was being done to him. He stopped, started again. Silence is neutral. It feels neutral. But silence is a choice. I made the wrong one. Every week for 21 years. I've known I made the wrong one. He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope. I see a written statement, everything I witnessed in 2003. He held it out. I'm prepared to testify against Mercer on the record, under oath. Elijah took the envelope. Why now? Because I watched you work in that room, Ren said. And I understood, not intellectually, actually understood, that you're not just fighting for yourself. He straightened. The change of a person putting something down after carrying it so long, they'd forgotten what not carrying it felt like. You're fighting for him, for a man we failed. A beat. I'm not failing him again. The door at the end of the hallway opened. Ashby. Mr. Cole, we're ready. Back in the room. Osei behind him. Aren taking his seat. Ashby held Elijah's test papers with both hands. In 43 years of mathematics, I have evaluated thousands of students. From MIT, Princeton, Cambridge, Oxford. He set the papers down. Your work today is exceptional. Problem 1 completed in 43 minutes against an expected 90. The reframing of the variable relationships. I have seen that methodology once before. In an unpublished research proposal submitted to a university mathematics department in October 2002. Complete silence. Problem 2. A shortcut not found in any published literature. Elegant. From the same mathematical tradition as Problem 1. He folded his hands. Problem 3. Original mathematical thinking at a professional level. Not undergraduate. Professional. He looked directly at Elijah. It is my professional opinion that you are not a fraud. You are a genuine mathematical talent. The accusation against you is not only baseless, it is, given what I now understand about your training, an act of profound institutional cruelty. Dr. Holt agreed. Ren stood. Professor Mercer to obtain the research he has claimed so for 1 years. Elijah exhaled, the first real breath since October 14th. Mr. Cole, Ashby said quietly. Elijah looked at him. Father would be proud. November 29th, 2024. Fine light AM. Hearing room B. High ceilings foppled on the wall. The room designed to communicate the weight of authority. One side, Elijah, Dr. O.C., Ren's sworn statement, Ashby's evaluation, Holt's assessment, 7 notebooks in the bag on the floor. Other side, Douglas Mercer, 58 years old, 20 years of tenure. The confidence of a man who had walked into rooms like this many times, and always walked back out intact. He nodded at Elijah when they made eye contact, polite. The nod of a man who felt no genuine threat, which meant he didn't know what was coming. Dean Patricia Forsyth. Sharp, the face of someone who had heard many things in this room. Professor Mercer, you requested this hearing. Please proceed. A Mercer adjusted his folder. One precise movement. This is straightforward. Mr. Cole submitted a solution no undergraduate could have written independently. The only logical conclusion is academic dishonesty. He spread his hands. The performance of reluctant duty. I take no pleasure in this, but Crestwood has standards. Forsyth turned. Mr. Cole. Elijah stood. I didn't cheat. The method I used came from my father's notebooks, dated 2001 through 2003, written at this university, a full year before Professor Mercer published the same methodology under his own name. Mercer's expression shifted. Small, controlled, but there. Those notebooks could be fabricated. Then explain this. O.C. placed a document on the table. Research proposal submitted by Marcus Cole, October 2002. It describes in full the methodology Professor Mercer published in April 2003. Another document. Formal complaint filed by Marcus Cole, February 2003, alleging his doctoral advisor had taken his research. Another, the department's response. Complaint dismissed. Marcus Cole expelled 3 weeks later. Mercer leaned forward. Historical documents don't establish. There's more. Ashby's evaluation, Holt's assessment. Iron's sworn statement slid across the table. Mercer's eyes went to it. He didn't touch it, just looked, and something moved across his face. Controlled, gone quickly, but not quickly enough. Dr. Wren was a graduate student here in 2001 and 2002. He witnessed everything, prepared to testify. Under oath, Wren has personal motivations against whom. Forsyth's voice, quiet, precise. Mercer stopped. Against whom? She repeated. Dr. Wren have personal motivations? Silence. Mercer looked at his folder the way a man looks at something he was counting on and can no longer count on. Elijah stood up, placed the 7th notebook on the table. My father's final research notebook. Original. With the library intake stamp from Crestwood's Mathematics Reading Room, September 2001. He opened it, turned to a specific page. Here, in my father's hand, November 2002, showed to Mercer today. He called it exceptional. Wants to discuss submission timeline next week. He turned to another page, and here, different handwriting. Added to my father's notebook by someone else, November 14th, 2002. He looked at Mercer. Your handwriting, Professor. Words. He read it aloud. Exceptional methodology. Recommend for departmental presentation. D. Mercer. He closed the notebook. 4 months later, you published this methodology. Your name only. No acknowledgement. No citation. No mention of the graduate student whose notebook you wrote those words in. He looked at Mercer directly, the way he'd practiced being able to look. Level. Certain. My father was 23 years old. He thought truth had weight in this institution. You spent 21 years making sure it didn't. You destroyed his career, his ability to fight. And 6 years after you expelled him from this building, he died because he couldn't find his way back from what you took. I didn't raise his voice. I didn't need to. And now you tried to do the same thing to me, because I walked into your classroom, because I solved your equation, because you looked the back row and decided you were looking at someone who couldn't fight back. He put the notebook back in his bag. You were wrong about my father, he said, and you're wrong about me. Mercer opened his mouth, closed it. 20 years of tenure, 3 dismissed complaints, a career assembled from stolen parts, and now nothing. No argument left, no move left, because the notebook was real. The handwriting was his. The dates were real. Wren was going to testify. And the thing about a lie maintained for 21 years is the weight it requires. Every year, every citation, every award ceremony, every time you explain a methodology that belongs to someone else, you carry all of it, until the day you walk into a room and it's been put on a table where everyone can see it. Forsyth looked at Mercer for a long moment. Then she turned away from him. The charge of academic dishonesty against Elijah Cole is dismissed, effective immediately. A pause that had the weight of 21 years inside it. An investigation will be opened into Professor Douglas Mercer regarding allegations of research misconduct, fraudulent academic accusations, and systematic abuse of institutional authority, spanning a period of not less than 21 years. She gathered her papers. This hearing is adjourned. Investigation took 4 months. 4 additional cases of research misconduct confirmed. 3 former students came forward. Mercer's tenure revoked in March 2025. Not resigned, revoked. His publications flagged. His name removed from the department website. The endowed lecture series renamed. Scholarship dissolved. He wasn't imprisoned. Elijah had complicated feelings about that, which he didn't try to simplify. What happened instead? Douglas Mercer, who had spent 20 years being the most consequential person in every room he entered, became someone no one wanted in their room. No mathematics department would hire him. No journal would accept his submissions. The speaking circuit evaporated. He had spent 2 decades trying to make Marcus Cole invisible. Now he was the one nobody wanted to see. April 2025. Crestwood formally credited Marcus Cole as the original author of the 2003 paper. The American Mathematical Society issued a correction to the historical record, a short statement, precise language. But in mathematics, where attribution is everything, where the question of who thought of this first is the whole question, it meant something complete. His name back, the right name, in the right place. The Marcus Cole Mathematics Scholarship established that same month. Full funding for first-generation students. From neighborhoods where brilliant people grew up without anyone making room for what they carried. Dr. Wren donated the first $50,000. He called it penance. Elijah thought that was probably the right word, and probably not enough. Both things true simultaneously. He let them both be true. Spring 2025. Elijah published his first paper, an extension of his father's work, taking Method C further than Marcus had gotten the chance to take it. Building on what had been buried. Doing what his father would have spent his career doing if his career hadn't been taken. The dedication read, for Marcus Cole, who solved this first, who taught me that numbers don't lie, who deserved so much more than he got. His mother framed it, hung it in the living room next to the newspaper article. Local student exposes decades of academic fraud. Father's legacy restored, and below both, the photograph. Marcus at 21, mid-law, full of the specific hope of a person who hasn't yet found out what's coming. Finally seen. Finally in the right place, fall 2025, room 118. Elijah walked in for the first time in almost a year. Same blackboard, same afternoon light through the south-facing windows. Different energy entirely. The particular difference between a space that has been cleared of something wrong and a space that hasn't. Teaching assistant now. Working under Dr. Adeze Nwosu, who upon hearing the full story had said only, good. Now, let's make sure it doesn't happen in. Back row, far left corner. A young man, 19 or 20. Backpack positioned precisely. Notebook already open. Not making eye contact with anyone. The practiced non-presence of someone who had learned, somewhere along the way, that visibility had costs. Same seat. The exact same corner. After class. Elijah walked to the back. Your problem set from last week, he said. The approach you used on question 4. Where did that come from? The young man looked up. Cautious. I just worked it out. I know, Elijah said. That's exactly why I'm asking. He reached into his bag. Pulled out a notebook. A reproduction. All 7 of his father's notebooks digitized and bound. Every page. Every margin note. Every date. He set it on the desk. This helped me. Maybe it'll help you. The young man picked it up, turned to the first page. Marcus Cole, Crestwood University. September 2001. Who is Marcus Cole? Elijah looked at the name. Someone who figured out how to think about very hard problems, he said, and who wanted other people to be able to think about them too. I paused. He just didn't get to do the wanting in person, so he left it in writing. Is he my father? Oh, a beat, yeah. The young man held the notebook carefully, the way you hold something when you understand without being told that it has weight. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, Elijah said. Just use it. He walked out of room 118 into the corridor. Late afternoon light through the east windows, low and long and patient. The kind that makes ordinary things look like they mean something. Maybe they do. Maybe that's not the light. Maybe that's just what happens when you finally stop looking away. I thought about his father walking this same corridor in 2001. 21 years old. Notebooks in his bag. The hope of a person who has found the thing he was made for and has just entered the room where he's going to do it. Thought about the young man in the back corner with the notebook in his hands, who had just been given something that had been waiting 23 years to be passed along. The truth is a number. It doesn't change based on who's looking at it. Doesn't diminish because someone powerful has decided it's inconvenient. Doesn't disappear when an institution chooses not to see it. It just waits. Patient. Exact itself. His father had done the work. Elijah had done the proving. And now, a notebook with a name on the first page was sitting in the hands of a 19-year-old in the back corner. And whatever that young man built with what was inside, it would be one more thing that began with Marcus Cole. One more thing that belonged to him, that no one could take. Elijah put his bag on his shoulder, walked down the corridor through the east door, out into the afternoon. The light was going somewhere. So was he.